It was just a click. A single, reckless click on a cryptic dark web link that promised the unseen. Now, Ethan Caldwell is running from a nightmare that knows his name, and it's watching you too. Dare to dive into the shadow cache, but be warned. Once you bid, there's no escape. Like, share, and follow, if you're brave enough to uncover the truth. Why it works. This opening teases the inciting incident, establishes the protagonist, and directly addresses the reader, creating a sense of shared danger. The call to action feels like a challenge, encouraging engagement by appealing to the audience's curiosity and bravery. The rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the grimy windows of Ethan Caldwell's Portland apartment. The city outside was a blur of neon and mist, its pulse a distant hum beneath the storm's roar. Inside, the air was heavy with the sour tang of instant coffee, unwashed clothes, and the faint, metallic scent of overheated electronics. Ethan sat hunched over his laptop, the blue glow carving his gaunt features into sharp relief. At 27, he looked older than his years, his eyes shadowed from sleepless nights, his dark hair tangled and overdue for a cut. The apartment was a chaos of empty takeout containers, scattered cables, and stacks of books on cryptography and coding, a testament to a life spent chasing the edges of the digital world. Ethan was no stranger to the internet's hidden corners. As a teenager, he'd cut his teeth on pirated games and sketchy forums, drawn to the thrill of forbidden knowledge. By the time he dropped out of college, unable to stomach the monotony of lectures, he'd graduated to the dark web, a digital wilderness where anonymity was both shield and trap. He wasn't a hacker, not in the glamorous Hollywood sense, but he was fluent in the tools of the trade. Tor, VPNs, and the cryptic onion links that led to places most people didn't know existed. The dark web wasn't just a marketplace for drugs or weapons. It was a realm of pure unpredictability, a place where curiosity could lead to wonder or ruin. For Ethan, it was the latter that kept him coming back. Tonight, the storm outside mirrored the restlessness in his chest. He'd been scrolling through the Abyss Hub, a dark web forum notorious for its mix of bravado, paranoia, and cryptic leads. The posts were a jumble of scams, dead links, and wild claims. But one thread stopped him cold, titled "The Shadow Cache, Bid for the Unseen." It was sparse, a string of numbers and letters forming an onion URL, followed by a single line. Place your bid. Name your price. See what no one else can. The replies were a chaotic swirl. Some users dismissed it as a scam. Others swore they'd bid and received something unreal. A user named Void Walker claimed they'd paid $500 in Bitcoin for access to a live feed that changed everything. The vagueness was infuriating, but it was the kind of mystery that hooked Ethan. He copied the URL, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. The dark web was a minefield. Malware, trackers, scams. But the pull of the unknown was stronger than his caution. He pasted the link into his Tor browser and hit enter. The page loaded with agonizing slowness, each pixel crawling into place as if reluctant to reveal itself. When it finally appeared, it was starkly minimalist. A black background with white text that read, "The Shadow Cache. Bid to unlock. Name your price." Below was a form with fields for a Bitcoin address, a bid amount, and a question. "What do you seek?" Ethan's pulse quickened. It felt like a game, but there was a menace in the simplicity, a sense of stepping into a trap. He leaned back in his creaking chair, running a hand through his greasy hair. He'd heard of dark web auctions, mystery boxes, stolen data, even whispers of human trafficking, but this was different. No description, no hint of what the bid would buy. It could be nothing, or it could be everything. He checked his Bitcoin wallet. $300 scraped together from freelance coding gigs. It wasn't much, but it was enough to play. He typed in a bid of $200, hesitating over the "What do you seek?" field. After a moment, he wrote, "Truth." It felt pretentious, but it was honest. He hit submit and waited. The screen didn't change. No confirmation, no loading bar, just silence. He refreshed the page, but it was gone, replaced by a 404 error. Frustration surged. Had he just flushed $200 down a digital drain? He checked his wallet. The transaction was pending, but there was no recipient address, no trace of where it had gone. He slammed his laptop shut, the sound sharp in the quiet room, and paced the cluttered floor. The storm's rhythm a mocking echo of his agitation. Sleep was a lost cause that night. Ethan tossed on his lumpy mattress, the glow of streetlights seeping through the blinds, painting the room in slivers of grey. Every creak of the old building made him tense, as if someone was lurking just beyond the door. He told himself it was paranoia, the kind that came with too much time online. But the unease clung to him like damp clothes. By morning, he was bleary-eyed and jittery, the coffee pot his only ally. He powered on his laptop, half expecting to find it bricked, but it booted normally. Then his phone buzzed, a notification from an email address he didn't recognize, a random string of characters. The subject line was blank. He opened the email on his laptop, routing it through a sandboxed environment to avoid malware. The message was brief. Bid accepted. Access granted. Check your downloads. His heart skipped. He hadn't downloaded anything, but when he checked his downloads folder, there it was. A file named shadowcacheaccess.7z. He ran it through every antivirus he had. Malwarebytes, Kaspersky, even a custom script he'd written. It came up clean, but that didn't ease his nerves. Dark web files were notorious for hiding their teeth. Still, curiosity won out. He unzipped the file, revealing a single executable. Viewer.exe. His finger hovered over the trackpad. He knew better than to run unknown executables, but the pull was irresistible. He launched it, and a window opened, full screen, pitch black. For a moment, he thought it had crashed, but then text glowed in the center. "Welcome to the shadow cache. You have one view. Choose wisely." The screen shifted, revealing a grid of thumbnails, each a blurry image with a cryptic label. Room 17, the Red Veil, Echo's End. There were dozens, maybe hundreds, each one a locked door. His mouse lingered over room 17, but something about the Red Veil drew him in. The thumbnail was a smear of crimson, like blood on a lens. He clicked. The screen went dark, then flickered to life. A video feed loaded, grainy at first, but sharpening into chilling clarity. It was a room, small and windowless, with concrete walls stained by years of neglect. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh light on a metal table in the center. On the table was a figure, strapped down, their face obscured by a red cloth that moved slightly with their breath. Ethan's stomach twisted. He'd seen dark web streams before, staged torture, fake snuff films, but this felt different. The camera was steady, clinical, like a security feed. There was no sound, just the silent image of the bound figure. A chat window appeared on the right, messages scrolling rapidly. Usernames like Bloodhound and No Face, typed in a mix of English and coded slang. "Raise the veil," Bloodhound wrote. "Show us," Grimtide added. "Bid for it," Admin X replied. 1,000 BTC. Ethan's breath caught. 1,000 Bitcoin was millions of dollars. He typed, "What's under the veil?" But the message didn't send. He was a spectator, locked out of the conversation. The figure stirred, a muffled sound breaking the silence. A moan or a sob. The red cloth slipped, revealing pale skin and a trembling jaw. He wanted to close the window, but his hands wouldn't move. The chat erupted with bids, numbers climbing into the thousands. Then the feed cut to black. Text appeared. "Bid accepted." Veil raised. When the video resumed, the cloth was gone. The figure was a young woman, her face bruised and tear-streaked, her eyes wide with terror. She was gagged, but her muffled screams were unmistakable. Ethan's heart pounded. This wasn't Faye. The raw fear in her eyes was too real, too human. He fumbled for the keyboard, trying to close the program, but it wouldn't respond. The chat exploded with sickening demands, cruel jokes. A new figure entered the frame. A man in a black hooded jacket, his face hidden. He held a scalpel, its blade glinting under the bulb's light. "No," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. He smashed the power button, but the screen stayed on. The man leaned over the woman, the scalpel hovering above her chest. Ethan yanked the power cord, and finally, the screen went dark. He sat there, trembling. The silence of his apartment, now a roaring void. The woman's face was burned into his mind, her eyes pleading, hopeless. He didn't touch his laptop for 2 days. He barely ate, surviving on stale crackers and tap water. Sleep came in fits, haunted by flashes of the woman's face. Every noise outside, a car horn, a neighbor's footsteps, made him jump. On the 3rd day, he forced himself to power on his laptop. The viewer.exe file was gone, deleted without a trace. His downloads folder was empty, and the email had vanished from his inbox. It was as if the shadow cache had never existed. But the fear lingered, a weight in his chest that wouldn't lift. That night, his phone buzzed. A new email from the same random character address. The subject? Watch. Attached was a video file, a few megabytes. He didn't want to open it, but his hands moved on autopilot, transferring the file to a USB drive and plugging it into an old offline laptop he kept for emergencies. The video was short, less than a minute. It showed a dark room lit by a flickering bulb. In the center was a chair, and in the chair was Ethan. Not a lookalike. Him. His face, his clothes, his apartment in the background. He was staring at the camera, his expression blank, his eyes empty. The video ended with text. "Bid placed. You're next." Ethan dropped the laptop, his breath coming in panicked gasps. He tore through his apartment, checking every window, every lock. Everything was secure, but it didn't matter. Someone had been here. Someone had filmed him. He grabbed his phone, ready to call the police, but stopped. What could he say? That he'd accessed an illegal dark website and now someone was stalking him. They'd laugh, or worse, arrest him. He sat in the corner of his living room, a kitchen knife in his hand, watching the door. The city's hum was a cruel reminder of how alone he was. At dawn, he made a decision. He couldn't stay. He packed a bag, grabbed his laptop, and left, heading for a cheap motel on the outskirts of Portland. He paid in cash, gave a fake name, and locked himself in the room. The motel was a dive, peeling wallpaper, a mattress that smelled of mildew, But it was a fortress compared to his exposed apartment. For days, he researched, scouring dark web forums, posting anonymous questions about the shadow cache. Most users dismissed it as a myth, a scam to fleece naive bidders. But a few whispered about it in private messages, their words laced with fear. Ghostbite claimed to have bid and received a video of their own bedroom filmed while they slept. Lost Echo said they'd paid to stop a contract on them, only to vanish from the forums a week later. Ethan's paranoia grew. He stopped using his phone, bought a burner, and avoided anything tied to his real identity. He barely left the motel, surviving on vending machine snacks and tap water. His dreams were haunted by the woman's face, her screams blending with his own heartbeat. He started to wonder if he was losing his mind, if the video of himself was a hallucination, a trick of his exhausted brain. On the 7th day, a package arrived at the motel. It was small, wrapped in plain brown paper, no return address. The clerk said it had been dropped off by a courier who didn't leave a name. Ethan's hands shook as he carried it to his room. He didn't want to open it, but he knew he had to. Inside was a USB drive and a note, handwritten in block letters: "Pay or play." He plugged the USB into his offline laptop. It contained a single video, showing the woman from the first stream, her face now unrecognizable, her body broken. The camera lingered, then panned to a new figure, a man, bound to a chair, his face hidden. The video cut to text: "Bid to save. 5,000 BTC, 48 hours. Below was a Bitcoin address and a link to a new shadow cache page. Ethan's stomach churned. He didn't have that kind of money. And even if he did, he knew it wouldn't matter. The shadow cache wasn't about money. It was about control, about fear. He opened the Tor browser, navigated to the new link. The page was different, a live feed of the bound man. The chat was active, users bidding, taunting. Ethan typed, "Who are you?" And this time, the message went through. Admin X replied instantly, "You know who we are. Pay or play." Ethan typed, "I don't have the money." Admin X. Then play. The feed zoomed in on the man's face. It was Marcus, Ethan's friend, a coder he'd known since high school. Marcus's eyes were wide, his mouth taped shut. Ethan's blood ran cold. He hadn't seen Marcus in months, hadn't told anyone where he was. How had they found him? He typed, "Let him go." "Please?" Admin X, "Bid or choose. 5,000 BTC or his fate." The chat erupted with sadistic suggestions. Ethan's fingers trembled as he typed, "I can't pay." "I won't choose." The feed cut to black. When it returned, Marcus was gone. In his place was a new figure, bound and gagged. It was Ethan's sister Claire, her face pale and terrified. The text read, 48 hours. Pay or play? Ethan screamed, slamming his fists against the desk. He didn't know how they'd found Claire, how they'd orchestrated this nightmare. He tore through his belongings, looking for anything to sell, any way to scrape together the money. But it was hopeless. He was a nobody, a broke drifter with nothing to his name. Desperate, he returned to the forums, begging for help. Most users ignored him, but Ghostbite responded, "You can't pay them. They don't want money. They want you to break. Stop playing their game. Disappear." Ethan took the advice. He smashed his laptop, burned the USB drive, and left the motel. He hitchhiked out of Portland, heading north, staying off the grid. He didn't contact Claire, didn't check the news. He couldn't bear to know if she was alive or dead. He settled in a small town in Washington, working odd jobs under a fake name, always looking over his shoulder. Years passed. The shadow cache faded into a dark corner of his mind, a nightmare he tried to bury. He never went online again, never touched a computer, but the fear never left. Every knock, every strange glance brought it rushing back. He grew gaunt, his once sharp mind dulled by isolation and dread. He worked as a dishwasher, then a farmhand, moving from town to town, never staying long. The world moved on, but Ethan was frozen, trapped in the shadow of that night. One evening, in a rundown diner in Idaho, he saw a news report on the TV. A dark web ring had been busted, a group trafficking in live torture streams. The name Shadow Cache flashed across the screen. Ethan's heart stopped. The report said the ringleaders had been arrested, the servers shut down. But some victims were still missing, their fates unknown. Ethan left the diner, his hands shaking. He wanted to believe it was over, that the nightmare was dead. But as he walked into the night, he heard it, a faint click, like a camera shutter. He spun around, but no one was there. Just shadows, stretching endlessly into the dark. He kept moving, driven by a primal need to escape. He crossed into Montana, then Wyoming, living out of a battered backpack. He avoided cities, sticking to rural towns where the internet felt like a distant rumor. But the shadow cache wasn't done with him. In a Wyoming motel, he found a note slipped under his door. "You can't outrun the bid." It was unsigned, but the handwriting matched the one from the motel package years ago. He burned the note, checked out, and hit the road again. In Colorado, he thought he'd found peace. He worked at a remote ranch, mending fences and tending cattle. The ranch owner, a grizzled man named Tom, took a liking to him, sensing a haunted soul, but asking no questions. For a while, Ethan felt human again. He laughed with the other hands, shared beers by the fire, let himself believe he could rebuild. But one night, as he checked the barn, he found a USB drive taped to a post. His blood ran cold. He didn't touch it, didn't look at it. He buried it in the dirt and left the ranch the next morning. The years blurred. Ethan's memories of the shadow cache grew hazy, but the fear remained sharp. He was 35 now, his face lined, his body lean from a life of constant motion. He'd settled in a small New Mexico town, working as a janitor at a community center. He kept to himself, avoided eye contact, lived in a one-room apartment with no TV, no phone. He thought he'd finally outrun it. Then, one night, as he swept the community center's empty halls, the lights flickered. He froze, broom in hand, the hum of the fluorescent bulbs, now a menacing buzz. The air grew heavy, like the storm from that night in Portland. He heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing from the far end of the hall. He gripped the broom, his heart racing. "Who's there?" he called, his voice cracking. No answer. The footsteps stopped. He edged toward the exit, his eyes scanning the shadows. As he passed the bulletin board, he saw it. A Polaroid pinned to the cork, its edges curling. It was a photo of him, taken moments ago, sweeping the hall. Below, in Sharpie, was written, "Bid closed. Game over." Ethan ran. He didn't stop for his things, didn't look back. He stole a bike from outside the center and pedaled into the desert night. The stars cold and indifferent above. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to keep moving. The shadow cache had found him again, its reach infinite, its hunger insatiable. He rode until dawn, his legs burning, his breath ragged. In a small gas station, he saw another news report. The shadow cash case had been reopened. New evidence suggested the ring wasn't fully dismantled, that splinter groups were still active, operating on hidden servers. Ethan's knees buckled. He bought a coffee, his hands trembling, and sat in the corner, watching the door. A man entered, his face hidden by a hoodie. He didn't order, didn't look around. He slid into the booth across from Ethan and placed a USB drive on the table. "You're a hard man to find," he said, his voice low, accented. "Eastern European, maybe?" Ethan's mouth went dry. "Who are you?" he managed. The man smiled, his teeth glinting. "A collector. You owe a debt. The cash never forgets." He pushed the USB drive closer. "One last bid. Pay or play forever." Ethan stared at the drive, his mind screaming to run, to fight, to do anything but take it. But his hand moved, closing around the cold metal. The man stood and left, vanishing into the dawn. Ethan sat there, the drive heavy in his palm, the weight of a decade's fear pressing down. He knew he couldn't outrun it. The shadow cache wasn't a place, not a server or a group. It was a force, a digital demon that fed on curiosity and despair. He walked to a nearby library, used a public computer, and plugged in the drive. It contained a single file, a video. He hesitated, his finger trembling over the play button. He didn't want to see it, but he had to know. The video loaded, showing a familiar room, concrete walls, a single bulb. In the center was a chair, empty. The camera panned to a mirror, and in the reflection was Ethan, his face older, hollowed by years of running. The screen flickered, and text appeared. "You are the bid. You are the prize." The video ended. The computer shut down, its screen black. Ethan sat in the silent library, the weight of the truth crushing him. The shadow cache had never been about money or torture. It was about him, his curiosity, his hubris, his need to see the unseen. He'd bid his soul that night in Portland, and now the debt was due. He left the library, the USB drive in his pocket. He walked into the desert, the sun climbing high. He didn't know if he'd keep running or if he'd finally stop, letting the cache claim him. But as he walked, he heard it again, the faint click of a shutter carried on the wind. He didn't turn around. He knew no one was there, just the shadows, watching, waiting.